Hi, everyone. This is the Voltha TST meeting for June 30th, 2020. This meeting is recorded and we publish this to YouTube. We have two items on the agenda. One is discussing EPON support. Takahiro has a presentation about that. And the second is we have a document out there about updating Helm and Kubernetes versions used for Voltha. I was planning on doing the EPON support first, unless do we want to change that order? Does anyone have an opinion about that? Okay, well, I'm going to turn over I'm going to stop sharing and I'll let Takahiro take over.
Okay, thank you. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Hello, this is Takahiro from NTT. I'd like to discuss NTT's contribution of EPON support to Voltha. I'd appreciate if TST member could comment on our contribution. After introducing NTT's contribution schedule, I'd like to discuss contribution form of EPON adapter. We are working on the development of EPON compatible Voltha. As a first step of the contribution, we have already developed EPON compatible tech profile and merged into Voltha 2.4. As a second step, NTT and Furukawa plan to develop OLT and ONU adapter and test on hardware. EPON has plural subdivided specifications called package, so NTT will be in charge of development of package B, and Furukawa will be in charge of package A. We aim to complete an internal POC in fourth quarter. So we plan to contribute tested software to Voltha 2.6 if 2.6 will be released in December. And we plan to develop an internal proof of concept. We understand that it would be ideal to switch OLT specifications by just changing the technology profile. So in this book, we are going to demonstrate switch of OLT specifications between package A and package B by only changing tech profile on common OLT hardware. We are going to use Tibit microplug OLT as an OLT hardware which supports IEEE standard. In terms of this contribution, I have two things I want to ask TST. And the first is a contribution form of EPON adapter. I think there are two options of contribution form. We understand it is difficult to make Broadcom OLT compatible with EPON at the moment because BAL doesn't support EPON now. So we think Broadcom OLT is a future target to support EPON, and Tibit OLT is a first target to support EPON. Option 1 is a configuration in which OpenOLT, ONU adapter, and Tibit adapter are separated. However, we are concerned that this configuration of adapter will be separated from the Voltha master branch. Option 2 is a configuration in which functions for EPON, such as EOM, are integrated into OpenOLT ONU adapter. This configuration is gRPC and TAPI conversion part, but we are not going to include this conversion part in Voltha release.
Well, question. Why
Yes.
why are you concerned option 1 means the Tibit adapter or the EPON adapter is not part of Volta or in the master branch? Volta was always designed to have multiple or potentially multiple adapters. So I'm not sure why you see option 1 as not viable for that reason.
I understand many people focus on the development of OpenOLT or any adapter. So, I'll make the Tibit adapter. So it is separated from OpenOLT or any adapter. So I think I'm concerned that Tibit adapter is separated from the master of Voltha branch.
I guess I could, if the Tibit adapter is contributed to ONF and managed by Garrett, it would be a peer of the OpenOLT ONU adapter. Could you speak to the overlap between the OpenOLT adapter and the Tibit adapter? Or is there a huge overlap between that? Or is there very little overlap between those two concepts?
Several functions are overlapped, I understand, and the difference is tech profile part and EOM part. So we think we should make many function use commonly.
Okay. I'm wondering if those common functions then need to be pulled off into a library that could be used by both the OpenOLT adapter as well as the Tibit adapter. Okay, I mean, at this point, I think my personal opinion is that keeping the adapters separate probably makes sense in a common library, but that may change as you continue. All right, thank you.
Thank you. So yes, so we think option 2 can directly contribute to Voltha master branch, and in addition to that, it is easier to support EPON mode of Broadcom OLT in the future if the bar will support the EPON. So I'd appreciate if THC member could give me comments if have other comments.
Well, for one thing, option 1 can use Tibit's API directly, whereas
Yes.
option 2 means yet another conversion. It seems suboptimal. I'm still not following what the issue is with option 1. Does is it expected that the Tibit adapter will be closed source?
Sorry.
Is the Tibit adapter going to be closed source or open source?
I want to do the open source.
Okay, so what's the issue there then? I mean, it's also perfectly fine if it's closed source. Somebody has to maintain it. Just because there are more people maintaining, well, I don't know how many more people, but okay, there's at least some people maintaining OpenOLT adapter. Similarly, there has to be people who have to maintain the Tibit adapter and ensure that if there are changes between APIs, between the core and the adapters, then you have to keep maintaining the Tibit adapter. I still don't see the issue with option one. I don't know. Other TST members can comment.
I agree. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
I think
I think the same thing. It's the Tibit adapter is an OLT adapter, right?
Yes.
And it will also interact with the Broadcom ONU adapter, correct?
That I don't know. Takahiro, were you planning to use ONU adapters that are using Broadcom chips, meant for Broadcom chips?
Yes, we plan to use Broadcom chip as well. But now PAR doesn't support EPON, so
No, I'm talking about the ONU.
ONU?
Yeah, are you planning to use the Open ONU adapter together with the Tibit adapter?
Yes. The EOM is implemented. Will be implemented on OpenONU adapter.
So the Tibit adapter is actually two adapters. It's an OLT adapter and
yes, OpenOLT adapter and ONU adapter. Tibit adapter includes the OLT and ONU adapter.
I think for ease of development to start, there should just be separate adapters. We should have the Tibit OLT adapter and the Tibit ONU adapter. And if there's such a time where we see there's common code, then those can be put in the common library, especially if both of them are open source code.
see it could be put in a common library much further down the road. The other thing is, if you're concerned about sort of to start off with, you could certainly use the OpenOLT, OpenONU code as a base, and sort of just copy it and start the adapter from there. Obviously, like a bunch of that you'd want to just strip out, but you don't have to replicate a bunch of the work. You should just be able to duplicate code, like if that's the concern. But I really see, if you keep them separate, it's just a lot cleaner, right? You don't end up with Tibit-specific things in the OpenOLT, OpenONU adapter, and same thing the other way around.
Plus, you won't need that conversion.
yeah, I think option one actually is the way to go.
How about other folks? Girish, Ken, Ahir?
Yeah, I agree with all of the things that you said. I think Takahiro's concern was probably maintenance. That probably there are more developers in the OpenOLT adapter, and is that your concern that not many developers would be contributing to Tibit, and is that your concern?
Yes.
Well, someone has to maintain it. because if it's part of the OpenOLT adapter, then we need a Tibit hardware in some labs and constantly verifying it to ensure that the functionality is still in place.
And for that, Tibit would have to become part of the ONF's continuous certification program.
Yeah, I would, I would think just separate it out. I mean, why put it?
Option one, I think it's just like you can start development with option one, and then if there comes such a time that there's no point to do option one and go to option two, then migrate at that time. But you can start with option one.
I
So
think we're seeing, oh, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, sorry, so for the ONU adapter, because the Broadcom ONU adapter is very OMCI specific, and this I think would be using EOAM, right? So I don't know how much of commonality would be there between these two ONU adapters to be specific, except for the not bound, which is going to be the adapter interface. So that's going to be common. But after that, I don't know how much is going to be common. So I think, as everyone is suggesting, I think having separate adapters at this point would think simpler and cleaner, I would think.
Okay, Takahiro, do you, I guess most people are agreeing that option one is better.
Okay. Okay. So I'll think about the option one. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your comments. And okay, let me move on to the next question.
Sorry to interrupt. Can I ask one more question? So the
Okay.
communication between the Tibit adapter and the Tibit OLT, is it a layer 3 communication, or do they directly
I asking real-time communication is done between TAPI?
the adapter and the Tibit OLT? Because the Tibit OLT is a micro OLT, right?
Yes, it is a microplug OLT, yes. And I understand the TAPI do a real-time communication between Tibit OLT and Tibit adapter management software.
So my understanding was that it was L2, but I could be wrong. Chip is online, right? Chip, do you know?
Yeah, it's a layer 2 connectivity. It's IEEE 1904.2.
Okay, so yeah, so that is, I think, a substantial difference, right, between the adapters, because the underlying thing needs to change, I think, quite a lot. Right?
Okay, so that's even more pointing towards option one then.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, and I have another question. And we develop adapter based on OpenONU adapter between Python, but I understand that OpenONU between Golang is being developed now. So we are concerned that Python-based OpenONU will be removed from master branch of Voltha. around December when we complete EPON adapter. Could you answer this question?
I'm not sure what you mean by removed, but it's certainly possible that in a deployment that the Golang 1 will be deployed. That doesn't mean that it's a separate repository. It has its own master branch.
But it might be that support for the open ONU adapter in Python is essentially deprecated if and when the open ONU adapter in Go is completed and tested and becomes kind of the de facto standard in Voltha.
Yeah.
I suspect fewer and fewer people will contribute or kind of work on the Python version. Again, if you are doing your work in a separate repository, whoever's working on that code's maintaining it, so it's irrelevant if it's a separate adapter. What happens to the Python version of the OpenONU adapter? That makes sense?
Do you keep use OpenONU adapter in Python?
Yeah. The current OpenONU adapter is written in Python, but I think one of the things that you need to remember that the OpenONU adapter is not specifically, while it controls the ONU, it's basically an abstraction of the OLT's OMCI stack and state machines that normally an OLT runs. And wouldn't an EPON, you'd have completely different mechanisms involved for discovery and enabling of an EPON ONU. I'm not an EPON person, I'm more XGS PON and GPON. So I would think, wouldn't a EPON ONU adapter be a completely different device adapter? I mean, it has no relationship to the XGS version, except for how it's used. It provides the EPON protocol stack that normally EPON OLT runs.
So if I may give my 2 cents, while it is true that we are probably going to switch on the OpenONU adapter, the Go version that is being developed, but nothing prevents you to use whatever you developed based on the existing code, and then either evaluate if you want to move to a Go-based version 2, or perfectly fine if it suits your deployment and you're reaching the scale that you need with your developed Python ONU adapter for EPON. Just that's totally fine, and that goes again to the point that we were making before. I think keeping things separate in terms of adapters for both the OLT and the ONU for EPON makes a lot more sense to go along with your time frame and your scale needs. We moved to Golang because there was scale needs. You might not hit those scale needs, and it's perfectly fine having it in Python.
And also, since it is if it's a separate adapter in its own container, if you have an existing EPON OLT implementation to manage an EPON ONU in any language, if it can handle it can be adapted to handle the iAdapter gRPC interface, then you're not necessarily constrained to either Python or Go, if that's a quicker and more stable approach.
So net, I think this question was presented with the assumption that in the previous slide, you're going with option 2. So if you had gone with option 2, then maybe the future of the Python ONU adapter makes a difference. But if you go with option 1, what basically people are saying is the future of the Python ONU adapter really doesn't matter to you, since you'll be writing your own ONU adapter for EPON.
Yes. If I develop the TBit adapter by using the option 1, I think Python is better. I understand.
One thing that I want to point out is as Volta evolves, the interface between the core and the adapters will evolve as well. Currently, we use Kafka, and there's a chance that down the road we'll move to gRPC. So whichever adapter you're using, and if you want to use the latest version of the core down the road, then chances are you'll have to migrate to gRPC as well. So it's not something that it's cast in stone at this time.
In the interest of future proofing, so my understanding is that we will in 6 months or so switch to using the Go version and mostly drop support for the Python version. That's my current understanding. If that's the case, would it make sense for code reuse for this to be written in Go as well, in order to be able to take advantage of our new gRPC code when that is written? Just a thought of future proofing. Obviously, it can be written in anything, but that's just another consideration.
Yeah, and it's also the case that ongoing feature development for stuff like logging, log correlation, tracing, all of that's being done in Go, not in other languages. So if someone wants to make use of those features that are being added, then sticking with Go may be a benefit there.
So did that answer your question, Takahiro?
Okay. Thank you for your comments. That's all from me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Takahiro. Let me share my screen. Okay, the next item we had on the agenda was discussing this document that's been going around, which is the updated Helm and Kubernetes versions for Volta. So Saurav, did you want to lead in with this?
Well, okay. So we're doing a code freeze today, as I've been threatening for a while. But today is the day we freeze all the repos. We tag things. We create new Jenkins jobs for 2.4 release. We start testing that in our regression testing, find bugs, fix them, and so on. Basically everything that we do for an official Volta release. But a few days ago, I think late last week, we got a request from Manuel to upgrade 2.4 to support Helm 2.14, Kubernetes 1.18. Because it's needed downstream in the A4 project. And so we had a discussion with the TST. I also discussed with the ONF team because the the work done to ensure that things are working and stable in our tests, the work that needs to happen in all our test pods is kind of overwhelmingly ONF issue. So both the TST and the ONF team feels that if we have to do this upgrade, then it's better to do it for the 2.4 release, which will undoubtedly delay the 2.4 release. But it's a lot better than not doing it in the 2.4 release and then turning right around and trying to do a minor release with the upgraded versions. So the decision was to do this, even if it means that the 2.4 release will be delayed a bit. Hopefully not too much. We shall see. So we started coming up with this document. And as you can see on the left-hand side, there are certain steps that we can take. Zach will go through the steps, but basically the highlight that I wanted to point out is there are certain steps that we need to take before we will do this upgrade. And that's basically all the things that we typically do for a release, things like creating these tags, creating these Jenkins jobs, ensuring that all the bugs are rooted out in 2.4, the ones we know of, before we attempt this upgrade. Because often it happens that, if you try to do these things simultaneously and then we see bugs, then we have to spend a lot of time trying to figure out, okay, was there a problem in the code base itself? Or was it a problem with some changes that we did to the hem charts or kind Voltha or what have you, right? So step 0 is essential, that we complete step 0. To the point that we would have normally done this for 2.4 release. And once step 0 is done, actually 1 and 2 can be done simultaneously without any harm. And then the following steps of actually doing the upgrade and getting it into our test environment and making sure things are stable and working, that's steps 3, 4, and 5. That will happen after step 0 is done. So that's the lead in. Zach, over to you if you want to go into more detail.
Okay, thanks, Saurav. So yeah, what Saurav was saying, basically, we don't want to change what goes into the Voltha containers, while at the same time we're changing the Helm charts and orchestration and everything else below them. So step 1 is make sure everything is stable and at least reach a point where we have versions that are tagged. These would be Voltha containers that we're going to tag. And then we're going to make sure that we're running integration tests to make sure that those are continuing to run and we can compare the results of those tests and as we evolve the Helm charts and version of Kubernetes we use. So that way we're the only variable we're changing is the Helm charts and Kubernetes versions. Go through that release process. The next step was upgrading to be the latest version of the Helm charts, or the latest 2.x version of Helm, because there's some additional stricter linting fields. Much of this, I believe, has been done or has evolved to it. There may be a few other, we may need to just do a final pass on the Helm charts to make.
I'm still confused about this step, I'll be honest.
Okay.
Once we freeze 2.4 and have gone through testing, I'm trying to understand the value of this step. I understand there's more linting, but if we went straight to 3, wouldn't we get that anyway? This seems like additional work, and I'm not quite sure of the benefit.
I think you're right that if we did jump to 3, that those additional checks would exist. The main reason for this, I think, is to just try and reduce the delta as much as possible. Additionally, if we look at, there's a difference between step So if we go through the other steps, the next step of that is upgrading the charts for compatible with newer Kubernetes API versions. And then there are two different steps for the Helm 3 upgrade. One is update just the Helm 3 tooling. And then the next is to update the charts to be Helm 3 compatible. And if we're just using Helm 2 style charts with Helm 3, then I think that what you're saying makes sense. All we do is we update to Helm 3, and we don't actually Helm 3i's the charts, which involves changing the API version and moving the requirements file or the requirements into the charts YAML file.
Yeah, I mean, I look at our charts, and okay, moving the API version to V2, I'd have to go look at what we've actually got them at for the most part right now. I can't remember if we have it as V1, probably. I assume so.
Yeah, it should be V1, and also some of our charts are lacking that because Helm 2.14, which we're on, doesn't require that API version.
Right, but
Yeah, some of them are V1 beta 1, which
that's different.
Yeah, that's the Kubernetes.
That's
API
different.
Okay. Yeah.
So within the past couple months, most of them an API has been added to. An API version has been added to and added to V1. So I guess particularly around the jump between 2 and 3, I think most of the work's actually already been merged into the repository to add the API version, although it is V1. So what we're talking about is really change the API version, add the requirements to the chart YAML as opposed to a separate file, and I'm not even sure most of our charts don't have requirements, so I'm not even sure that that's relevant. And so then we're going from changing the value from V1 to V2, as well as Chip was mentioning all the manifest APIs from their beta version to their release version. Why are we the 2.16 one still comes back and says, okay, we get to 2.16, who cares? I just go to 3.
Yeah, actually, I'm running Kubernetes 1.18.4, and then the Helm that everybody else is running, the 2.14, and upgrading Kubernetes to almost what you have was real simple chart changes. So I don't know.
So I don't think that any of these changes are that huge. I think this is baby steps, and I just tried to call out how small the changes were.
But going to the step 1 involves not only making chart changes, but then changing a pipeline to use 2.16, which we're then pretty quickly going to change to use 3. Right, and potentially also says, okay, there might be not only changes to the Jenkins pipeline, but does that also include changes to kind Voltha? And again, I stressing to see the value of that step. We're talking very few changes to go from where we are now to next version of Kubernetes and next version of Helm. The intermediate steps don't make sense to me.
I think that given how small some of these steps are, I think that that may be the case. I personally think that jumping through and doing step 1 and 2, which we can do immediately, that will prepare us to make 3, 4, and 5. I think these two steps. Maybe what we don't do is we skip this section. We don't update all the CI infrastructure. We just make sure that it manually works. And then that skips the issue you were bringing up about having to make a bunch of changes to possibly kind Voltha, possibly all of our deployment systems, and then immediately change them again to jump to Helm 3. Does that sort of address what you're talking about, David?
Yes, it addresses some of it. How are you going to run the manual changes? We're just going to pull up something in AWS, install it all manually?
Or just have somebody manually check it.
I mean,
none of these.
Again, my preference would be, look, tag 2.4, get it to the point we're comfortable with it, and then just merge 3 changes, the 3 and the 118 changes. That'd be my preference. Again, I don't see the values. If other people see the value of these going through these other steps, I'll be quiet about it. I just don't see it. I think the changes we're talking about, I was surprised, but they are quite minimal.
Right. So maybe we just, what I'm suggesting is maybe we don't automate the checks. We just have people make sure that they're backwards compatible for steps 1 and 2. And then when we move on to doing the actual Helm 3 and later Kubernetes version upgrades, those are more substantial. But we don't do all the sort of due diligence that we normally do for a minor version update. And we don't do the upgrade past Helm 2.14. We jump straight to Helm 3 when we're doing our tooling upgrades.
I don't know what other people think.
I get the not wanting to try to stabilize on an old version that's not the final version, and that's what I'm trying to address.
Again, if I'm the minority here, that's fine. That's what it is.
Well, I'm fine with skipping these. That's less work for on the QA side if we avoid doing these changes, but we're fairly confident that they would work. And then jumping straight into these upgrades, which would happen after we hit a stability point. To sort of walk through those, step 3 is to update to Helm 3 and upgrade the tools using it, but we're still using the Helm 2 charts, so they're API version 1. We upgrade kind Voltha, which I think, David, you have a patch for that upgrades it to Helm 3 compatibility.
Yes.
Okay. And so that had some code changes. And then we need to upgrade our CI and testing tools, specifically the robot tests. I don't think anyone has looked at this, if there's specific changes that need to be made to the robot tests, especially because I think there are some command line invocations of Helm that maybe need to be changed. Then we go through and we actually update the CI system. So the CI management repo, which handles the tests that run on AWS, and then all the physical pods that we have. And this is also a one-way thing. Once we do this, I believe that all the releases that were on the required Helm 2 will no longer function properly. So this would also be an abandoning of the Voltha 2.3 release from ability to test and support that.
And I think that's mostly around setting the API version of the charts. If you leave the API version of the charts at 1, you probably have backward compatibility to Helm 2.
Right. And more, what I guess to clarify what I was saying, it means that since invoking Helm will get you Helm 3, those tests that maybe were designed to use Helm 2 would no longer run properly.
Okay.
The next step would be updating the charts to Helm 3. This is technically optional because Helm 3's backwards compatibility with V1 charts. But the concern is that because of the right now, the script that links the charts checks for the presence of the requirements file for validating them. People could slip a incompatible or broken chart in that lacks a requirements file but has dependencies. So we need to at least update the CI process to fix that script for checking charts. This could be done at a later time. Maybe this does not happen in 2.4. And then the last step is to update to the newer Kubernetes version. There's a way to pass the kind version to kind Volta, which picks a version of kind that aligns with the version of Kubernetes expected. I think Andrea put what the Kubernetes version is, and that kind has no support for 118.5, but if you look at the last version, it brings up 1.18.2. That might change during our process. I'm wondering if 118.2 to 118.5 is so small of a patch delta that it would be okay. Then we need to update any jobs that use the Kubernetes API. We need to update our CI jobs to pass that parameter or set it to be the default. And then we need to update our physical systems to reinstall a new version of Kubernetes. This will also break the 2.3 jobs if they aren't compatible. We're also thinking of different ways to deploy this. Previously, we used a kube spray to install them. We're thinking of changing over to using Rancher to deploy Kubernetes. And then the rest of this document, there's patches that David had submitted and Andrea's test he'd had from doing a successful run. So I encourage people to look over this document, make any comments if you see any roadblocks or problems that might arise because of this upgrade. But I guess this is the general thought of the way that this process would go. Do we have are there any other thoughts or input on this? Okay, there are plenty of comments here. Please leave comments here or send something to the mailing list. Are there any other topics for the overall Volta meeting? Okay, is for the 2.3 release, is there I know that we have a code freeze scheduled for tomorrow. Is there anything else, Saurav, that we need to do or that people will need to do regarding that code freeze?
No, not at the moment. I think we will announce when it's okay to start merging new code into master. But as of now, we are in code freeze.
Okay, great.
So the code freeze has already started then?
Well, is there something
sure
that
was
is
end of the day today or start of the day today?
Oh, it wasn't clear. What is remaining? What is critical that is still pending?
Well, I have a bug fix from Girish, though I'm assuming it's a bug fix. It can still go in.
Yes. Bug fix, yes.
And then we have some stuff on the Kafka topic exporter. I'm assuming that's not covered because it's not a Volta component, so that can probably go in. So those are the only two things I think were on my radar.
Okay. Anybody else has anything on the call? Anyone is aware of anything else?
I have 2 patch sets against kind Volta, which I consider bug fixes. I mean, one, there's some errors, messages that are actually logged during the run, which one patch addresses, and the other addresses kind of a bug that's there that I don't know how many people have run into.
Yeah, I also have a couple of patches for inbound to Helm charts and port configs.
Yeah, that anything that is required for test infrastructure to actually test the master or the release that we're intending to do, those I don't consider as new features.
Sorry, I got confused.
So things that are in the test brigade, you know, there's many pending stories in the test brigade you will find that are still listed as 2.4. That's still okay. So if it helps, we can give it till noon today, right? We will start tagging things after noon. And that can give you some folks some more opportunity. ONF has a holiday on Thursday. And you know, Friday is the 4th of July, observing 4th of July holiday. So my goal is to be able to tag it, create 2.4 jobs before the week, before we sign off for the weekend, the long weekend. So I think noon is a good compromise. If you need things to get merged before noon, that's fine.
Noon Pacific, not noon Hawaii.
Noon Pacific, sorry, yeah, that's right. So that's 3 hours away from now. And then we'll start tagging things in the afternoon. Okay.
Okay. Thank you all. Talk to you next week.
Actually, next week, actually, I should have added another item. So next week, there won't be a meeting because that's the same time that the ONF Spotlight on Broadband will be going on. The ONF Spotlight on Broadband is actually 2 live webinars, one on July 7th, that's next Tuesday, and the other on July 8th. That's next Wednesday. So these 2 will be live events. There'll be several talks, keynote talks from Deutsche Telekom, from Turk Telekom, from ONF. There'll be a panel. And then there are a bunch of accepted talks for the ONF Spotlight on Broadband. Those recordings, those pre-recorded sessions with all the speakers from the accepted talks, those pre-recorded sessions will then become available for anyone to view after those live sessions for the keynotes. So since the keynotes are next Tuesday and Wednesday, we will not have the TST meeting next Tuesday. Okay, look forward to seeing you all on the webinar. Thank you, and have a great 4th of July weekend if you're in the US. Bye all.
Thank you.
Bye everyone.
Thank you.